Hello, I'm Joanne Hampton with Manatee Educational Television. We are here today at Michael's on East with Project 180 for their Strong Voices, Strong Subjects lecture. Project 180 offers a second chance for offenders. Today, our speaker will be Professor James Byrne. So stay tuned. We are here at Michael's on East at the Project 180 event. And with me, we have the founder and CEO, Barbara Richards. Hi. I would love for you to share with us the actual mission of Project 180.
Project 180's mission is that we seek to reintegrate formerly incarcerated citizens into community life.
Now, I know the success of these wonderful programs that you have. Can you share those programs with us?
Sure. One of our star programs is this one right here, which is our Strong Voices lecture series, which is today, March 8th. And then we'll have another lecture on April 5th with the local treatment court judges, the sheriff, and the state attorney. And then on May 10th, we are hosting the California Secretary of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to come out and talk about some of the remarkable programs that they have out in California.
That is wonderful. I know when I was going through that you offer housing.
We do. We do have a small amount of housing. We house 6 men total at a time, and that really speaks to our vision, which is to reduce poverty, homelessness, unemployment, and criminal behavior among formerly incarcerated citizens. So that speaks also to the types of issues that occur, social ills that happen in our community when we don't try to help individuals who are coming out of prison or jail.
I think what the community doesn't realize is most of these men coming out were actually homeless and unemployed prior to going in.
Yes, about 17% of our students, because we do a financial literacy class in the jails and prisons, and also a CEO class it's a workforce education class, and we've surveyed everyone who's come through, and we've found that almost 1 out of 5 was homeless prior to incarceration.
And if it wasn't for programs like Project 180, they would just end up back on the streets.
Yes, and in fact, in our residential program, we have taken a number of people who have just been straight off the street, and everyone else has come straight from prison or jail.
Absolutely, and also with food and clothing.
Yes, and some transportation. We have a fee and fine assistance program where we will match their payments to get their driver's licenses back. Any old fees and fines, we'll match their payments up to $1,000.
And I just want to touch base on the one thing is not only you helping them to rebuild their life, but and get an education and a home, and it has, like, for me, I would believe it's dignity, self-esteem. I mean, you must have seen that really helps with the success.
Yes, and one of the things that the men in our program say about the home that we provide is that just being in a great family neighborhood, in a clean house that is beautiful, helps their self-esteem tremendously. They feel like they've already accomplished something. And they're great guys. These are great men. We're really fortunate to have the group that we have.
If I can ask you, what is the issue? Like, what do you want to share with the community today? There's one thing that you could share.
I would say that when we help them, we help ourselves. It's really important for us to recognize that the issues of homelessness and primarily homelessness and instability, family instability, are driven a lot by the population that's coming out of prison and jail. And so when you are homeless, you're more likely to become incarcerated. When you're incarcerated, you're more likely to become homeless. So it becomes a vicious cycle of instability in all ways. And so it's really important for us to support these men and women who are coming out.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if there's people out there that would love to help, donate, where do they go?
Go to our website, project180reentry.org, or come to one of our lectures, learn something, have a great time, meet the Project 180 family. Everyone here, it's a great group of people.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for everything that you do and all the help that you spread throughout the community.
Thank you. Thanks.
So Dan, we're here at Project 180. Tell me what this means to you and why this is so important to you.
This is so important because it fits in so much with our diversity initiative. I mean, we're trying for inclusion, and inclusion also means formerly incarcerated people coming out and entering society. And we've worked with Barbara and Tracy and Project 180 for the last 3 or 4 years, and they've also supported us. So it's a sort of symbiotic relationship.
Absolutely. I don't think that people realize that. I think I read somewhere it's about 30,000 are being released every year in Florida. That is a large number.
It's a lot, and now with the new amendment, the critical thing now is to get people to vote, get formerly incarcerated prisoners to vote, and that really is a big job, and I think everybody involved with Project 180 should be working on that as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm with Professor James Byrne. So I am so looking forward to your lecture, but if I could ask, is there that one or maybe two things that you're hoping that we walk away with today?
Takeaway, let me see. I guess first takeaway would be that we need to develop non-incarceration sanctions so we don't have to spend so much time talking about good prisons. We can talk about alternatives to incarceration. That'd be probably my major one. And second is there are models that we can identify for developing high-quality prison treatment programs, and that you'll hear me talk about today.
That is wonderful. We're really looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. All right. How are you? Everybody doing well? All right. Well, I would like to welcome everyone to Project 180's 6th season of Strong Voices, the lecture series, Models for the Future at Work Today. Thank you. Thanks. I'm Barbara Richards, the President, CEO, and founder of Project 180. And this season, we're looking at new and progressive models in incarceration and reentry, and ways that we can better prepare our incarcerated citizens for success on the outside. We are extremely grateful to all of our sponsors, and we're very excited to welcome Community Foundation as a platinum sponsor this year. I would like to note that their contribution toward the success of this program came from the Edward K. Roberts Emerging Needs Fund, and that in itself is a measure of success for this particular issue. We're really glad that it's being considered an issue that needs to be dealt with. So thank you, Community Foundation. And Katie, could you stand up just for a quick minute? It's Katie's birthday. Katie is from Community Foundation. All right, wonderful. All right, and then for the 4th year in a row, the Koski Family Foundation is a platinum level sponsor as well. We're expecting Bev any minute now. As she is, Bev. There you are. Wonderful. Thank you, Bev, for all that you do for our community and for Project 180. Thank you. Wonderful. We'd like to acknowledge a few special people in the audience, and I'll ask you to please hold your applause if you would. The Project 180 Board of Directors, Chair Tom Melville, Vice Chair and incoming Chair Tracy Pratt, James Holmes, Elisa Graber, Monica Waterman, the Honorable Bob Bennett, and Paula Fishman, our partner in this event, the Boxer Diversity Initiative, co-chairs of the series, Bob and Pamela Gore-Mead, our committee members, Wendy Cox, Paula Fishman, Pamela Gore-Mead, Heather Roberts, and our new staff member, Emily Rickerson. We have some dignitaries here today, State Attorney Ed Brodsky, Public Defender Larry Eager, and District Aide to Representative Margaret Good, Kay Mathers. Our volunteers, Susan Jarvis and my daughter Eleni from Los Angeles. And we would like to welcome and embrace the residents of Nick's House, which is Project 180's residential program. Could all of those I just mentioned, including our platinum sponsors, please stand? If you're a sponsor, thank you. Now, just a little housekeeping. The restrooms are right down here if you're unfamiliar with this venue. And the centerpieces that we have are yours after the luncheon for a donation of your choosing, and we thank you in advance for your generosity. I'm going to ask you to keep your phones handy but on silent. So if you can keep them on and nearby, you're going to need them later on in the program. And we have a lot of new people here today, so I'm going to do a hopefully quick run through of Project 180 and what we do. Obviously, we're a prisoner reentry program, and we incorporated in 2008, and a year later received our 501c3 status. It took us about 4 years to establish partnerships in the community and get our feet on the ground. But once we did, our board and volunteers and staff really kicked in, and we began delivering some really wonderful, very practical programs in prisons and jails locally. Our very first program started at DeSoto Annex, which is a state prison in Arcadia. That's our CEO program, and in that program we take CEOs of companies, hiring managers, and workforce agency specialists out to the prison to give 4 points of information to inmates who are about to get out within 6 months. How to find, apply for, interview for, and retain a position in each CEO's industry. It's very practical, and the inmates report that it's a great program for them. It helps them get started thinking about what they're going to do when they get out, and gives them up-to-date job information throughout the state of Florida. We're now just about to start working in collaboration with Career Source, Suncoast, to start a quarterly program at the Sarasota County Jail with the CEO program, so that we can do a combination of our CEO program and a job fair out there. Get people hired before they leave jail. And just a few months after our CEO program started in 2013, we got a call from Robert Harris of Cadence Bank in Birmingham, Alabama. And Robert said, hey, listen, we'd like to teach a financial literacy course in jails and prisons. Would you like to partner with us? I'm like, you bet, sure, absolutely. That's exactly what we want to do. And we've been thinking about it for a while, and we now use the FDIC Money Smart curriculum for adults. We go weekly to the Sarasota County Jail. We also teach weekly at the Hillsborough County Jail at Falkenberg Road. And we teach periodically at the women's prison in Bradenton, the Bradenton Bridge, as well as at Hardy Correctional State Prison. Interestingly enough, a couple of the guys who are in our financial literacy program at the county jail have come through our residential program, and one of them is still with us and with us today. About that same time in 2013, 2014, we decided to find out who was talking about prisoner reentry throughout the state of Florida and nationally. So we did a media audit, and we found that in the preceding year, only 2 articles had been written about prisoner reentry. And we knew this to be a paucity of information on something that was a really important issue. So that's why Strong Voices started, was so that we could take the conversation about prisoner reentry out of the halls of justice and out into the community, so that everyone would have an opportunity to learn about the way that this issue affects the community and individuals and families. Since, as of today, since our program started, we've served over 1,500 attendees at this lecture series. In our information and referral service, we started that out of necessity because we got so many calls, hundreds of calls every year from people who were seeking help finding housing, programs, and employment. Sometimes it would be the inmate who would make contact with us through letter, or it could be a family member or an attorney who was dealing with an individual who was about to get out, or a caseworker at the prison. And so we began a county-by-county search for housing programs and this year employment, to have lists of resources by county to send to individuals who are just about to get out. And that has proved very successful as well. But our long-standing dream has been our residential program, which we call Nick's House. Ever since we started Project 180, that has been our goal, is to open it. And you're going to hear more about it later from Matt, who is our house leader. But it really does hold our greatest promise to turn lives around and to give individuals who are interested in proceeding in mainstream life and getting out of street life, it's their best opportunity to move forward. So if someone is showing promise, we will bring them in. We provide as much as we can for the men We have only 6 men at a time in the program so that it can be quite comprehensive and in-depth. And so we provide housing, healthy food for meals, clothing, work boots, sometimes tools. Matt, I'm sure will tell you more about it, but it's a wonderful program, and the men in this program are absolutely phenomenal. And I'd like to ask them to stand up one more time, if you would, please. These men truly are turning their lives around in a very significant way and affecting others as well. So that brings you up to date with what we're doing, and I'd like for you to stay tuned because there are some exciting things afoot. And now I'd like to welcome to the podium a woman who makes a difference in someone's life every single day. She is a third-generation Floridian, a Sarasota resident, a Project 180 volunteer, and the co-chair of today's lecture series. So please welcome Pamela Gore-Mead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Pamela Gore-Mead, and I am both honored and humbled to be here in support of Project 180. And can't begin to tell all of you how grateful I am for your participation in today's event. It means a lot to us. Prison reform and reentry are social issues that have weighed on my heart for a number of years. Like many of you, I suspect, who feel compelled to become involved with a cause you feel is important, but don't, this is one of those things that kept nagging at me, something I felt I needed to get involved with, but just kept pushing onto the back burner, telling myself I'd do it later when I had more time. During the summer of 2016, when our daughter was preparing to head to Auburn University, her freshman reading assignment was Brian Stevenson's book, Just Mercy, which I read along with her. That back burner thing began inching forward toward the front burner. No sooner did I finish the book than I was ready to write Mr. Stevenson to see how I could become involved with his equal justice initiative. But Stevenson suggested that those wanting to become involved should start local, looking to where they could make an impact in their own communities. And then, like divine intervention, some 6 months later, I read a guest column in the Sarasota Herald Tribune, co-authored by Barbara Richards and Tracy Pratt, titled Consider Prison's Lasting Effects, and realized that that column was my call to action. I attended the Strong Voices, Strong Subjects luncheon that followed, and afterward I met Barbara and asked how I could become involved. Well, little did I know at the time, I'd be writing the next guest column for the Herald Tribune, serving on the Strong Voices Committee, and eventually co-chairing today's event. But this is what happens when a connection is made, when you simply can no longer ignore what is tugging at your heart, and you do the right thing. It's also what happens when you have Barbara Richards gently nudging you along. And now it's time for me to do the right thing one more time by turning our attention to today's main event, Professor James M. Byrne. Professor Byrne, who obtained his PhD from Rutgers University in 1983, has over 30 years' experience in the field of criminal justice and criminology. He is Associate Chair and Professor at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell at the School of Criminology and Justice Studies. Professor Byrne is the author of books, monographs, journal articles, and research studies on a range of corrections and sentencing subjects, such as evidence-based sentencing and corrections, offender change, prison violence, offender reentry, risk classification, the link between prison culture and community culture, the effectiveness of crime control technology, and the community context of crime. His work in the area of community corrections and evidence-based practices has received both national and international recognition. In 2011, Professor Byrne was the recipient of both the Distinguished Scholar Award and the Margaret Q. Warren and Ted Palmer Differential Intervention Award from the American Society of Criminology. He has provided testimony on the effectiveness of community sanctions before Congress and the U.S. Sentencing Commission. Since 2012, Professor Byrne has served on the United Kingdom Ministry of Justice's panel of experts, and in 2014 was appointed as the External Inspector of Prisons in Queensland, Australia. Most recently, Professor Byrne has become the director of the Global Community Corrections Institute, which explores global trends in the use of non-incarceration-based sentencing strategies. Please join me in welcoming Professor Jim Byrne.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Almost lunchtime for you, I guess. It is lunchtime. Happy to be here. I was asked to come up with some takeaways for this presentation. What should you take back with you? I think you already know, support Project 180 would be number one, and support Project 180 would be the second thing I'd mention as well. I think expanding the scale of those kind of programs is probably the next step. You have a model here. So I'm going to talk to you about global models, prisons around the world, prison crowding, and all that, but I think probably the most important thing is think globally, take a look at what I talk about, and think about how it can apply to what you're doing here. And I think if I accomplish that, then I've done something. I'll try not to hit you with too many numbers, but I'm going to throw some at you, and we'll talk about at least one model prison system to give you an idea of what's happening there. My observations are affected by a little bit what you heard. It's actually more like 40 years. We have to update my bio in terms of what I've done. I was involved in around 2005, 2006 for an initiative that you'll hear me talk a little bit about today, and it's affected the way I look at prisons. And it was an evaluation that I did of the National Institute of Corrections Institutional Culture Change Initiative. And at that time, they were having a lot of problems with prison crowding and prison violence, and they wanted to figure out how do you change the culture of prisons. And we were evaluating a strategy they were using, which essentially was if you could change the guard culture, it'll trickle down and it'll affect inmate culture. They didn't want to get at management culture at the top. They focused in the middle. And it was basically a mixed evaluation results that we found. But that kind of opened my eyes in terms of what was happening. And of course, we were visiting adult prisons around the United States as part of that. I also did a visit in Dublin, Ireland that it opened my eyes for different reasons, and it had to do with inmate staff ratios. In Ireland, the prison I visited, there were about 320 inmates in the facility, and there were the same number of staff. And so it felt very different with a 1-to-1 staffing ratio. It was actually more like 3-to-1 across the 3 shifts, but it felt different to see that type of relationship. So informal relationships can more likely to develop that can have an impact on behavior in that type of setting. So the scale is important. And this is the problem we have with mass incarceration. The scale is so broad that you really can't do some of the things that are happening in some of the smaller countries that you're going to hear about today. So we need to think about how to reduce the scale. So non-incarceration sanctions are an obvious one for that. And changes in sentencing length and sentencing type tie into that. I've also, since 2011, I guess, been involved in this international advisory panel. This is something the UK does that we don't do in the United States that I think we could do on the local level. And that is to have every new program and every existing program vetted, and only fund programs that meet basic standards of quality. And so that's the evidence-based practice, shtick that I do around the country when I speak on this, and we need that. UK's been doing that for a while, and I think it's a model we probably need to consider here. In 2012, I was asked to come to Australia and set up something that we call the Global Center for Evidence-Based Corrections and Sentencing. That was about developing global performance measures in the area of prisons. I wanted to be able to rank prisons in terms of quality and in terms of effectiveness across a variety of dimensions. To do that, you have to be able to collect data across the world. So you've got 220 countries. How are you going to do that? We started trying to get that in place. To do that, you need an agreement from people about what constitutes performance. And that's something that we were developing there. I spent about 2 years there, and most of you will appreciate this. We came back from Australia because we had an addiction problem with one of our adult children, which makes you not want to stay 10,000 miles away, and we came back to the United States. But that work is something that I've been continuing since that time, just not with that structure there. Before I left Australia, they thought they had a prison violence problem. Compared to the U.S. prisons, they didn't have a prison violence problem, but you hire a U.S. guy to come in and look at it. I guess you're going to hear that. But I did look at the causes of violence in prison, and one of the things I noticed is that a lot of it related to how the inmates perceived the staff looking at them, in particular Aboriginal offenders that felt like they were viewed as like less than human by the staff. And that was a problem, obviously, in those facilities. And so we tried to put recommendations in place as the inspector of prisons to try to change that behavior. And that's a difficult cultural change that had to happen there. So it definitely had an impact there. And also their work release programs in Australia are very different than this country. I like the models they did. They would train people on very specific talents that they had, and then they would send them off to do that work. And they literally would go out without supervision to the outback to build a house or an outhouse or whatever. And then if they came back, they were released. If they didn't, they went and found them, and then they have to stay longer in prison. But it was a very different model that I've never seen before. And I don't know if you could pull that off in the United States. Can you imagine sending a group of work release prisoners off to build a building and then come back? But maybe there's something to be said with that about responsibility and the notion of offender change. If you really believe that people can change, then you're going to have to trust at some point that they can change. And so that type of model is something, again, that's in the back of my mind as I think about this whole notion of change. And now the latest thing that I'm trying to do is try to pull together global performance measures in the area of non-incarceration sanctions. I hate to use the term alternatives to incarceration because it implies that the number one choice should be to put people in prison, and now we need alternatives to that. It really should be thinking more creatively about non-incarceration sanctions. Crime rates, we always think about crime rates, community protection. The crime rate today is about the same as it was when I was 16 in 1970. Not that much different. You know what is different? The incarceration rate and the size of mass incarceration. So don't think that you can't do it and have outcomes that you want. So there are things that we can do. So I just wanted to start with that. That's not even the presentation. I'm almost done, I know. But that's affected how I look at the world. And again, if I succeed today, it's to tell you more programs like the one you're supporting here, and think about how to change the way we view our response to sentencing, and in particular move in terms of non-incarceration. So I'm going to get into all these things. I'll do it, I hope, fairly quickly, but you do have a college professor and you're trapped here with me, and they told me 30 minutes, and I haven't taught a class under an hour and 15 minutes in 10 years, so this could be a problem, but I'll do the best I can, I hope. So we're going to get into each of these questions, and I'll look at global trends quickly, I hope. I'll look very quickly at the link between incarceration and crime rates. It's not there, but we'll present it. And we'll look at successful prison and reentry models. Can they be identified? Since I was asked to come here and talk about that, I thought maybe I should mention that. That'd be a good idea. And then what lies ahead in terms of the kind of work I'm doing right now. I just finished an article that'll come out in May on the global expansion of the private-for-profit prison industry and how they've decided to move into reentry and compete with the private nonprofits around the world. And so that's a major coming down the road that you're going to see. And the GEO group and some of the other big groups that are out there in the United States, they have their competitors in other parts of the world as well. So it's a major global market. So the prison industry is moving into the reentry industry if they're not there already, and that'll be something that I think it's important to keep in mind as we talk about programs like this one here, in terms of what local governments will be comparing and deciding what to do. And then I'll make some quick recommendations for some basic changes, which I already did. One of the things at the beginning is that just the typical disclaimer. It's hard to make comparisons globally because the offending rates are so different in different parts of the world, and also decisions that are made in terms of who we're going to incarcerate and who we're not are going to be different. So just take a look at conviction offense profile in the Americas, and I threw North and South America together here. About half of all sentenced prisoners are convicted of violent offenses, 10% for homicide, 36% for other violent offenders. That doesn't surprise anybody in this room in terms of that's kind of a general profile. It's 40% in Europe, 10, 30% respectively there, and it's only 20% in Asia. So you're seeing global differences in terms of who's in prison that might affect how they organize and fund and deal with offenders. Drug-related offenders in prison. Drug offenses are 21% of all sentenced offenders in the Americas, and again, I'm throwing North and South together there. 35% in Asia and 13% in Europe. Drug offenses and drug offenders are looked at very differently in Asia than they are in the United States. And if you view drug users as people who have some kind of moral deficiency, then you see drug offenses as a challenge to the moral code of the community. So I think that's one of the reasons you're seeing differences in Asia compared to the United States, and they've taken a very radical approach. In the United States, we talk about 3 strikes and you're out legislation. You don't want to know how that applies to drug offenders in Asia, because in many cases, the third strike is you're gone. So a very different orientation, but I'm convinced that it relates to cultural differences in terms of the view of drug use and what it does to the community cohesion, community level. So that's something, again, that I've been starting to write about and looking at with my colleague that's the chair of my department, Sheldon Zhang, who's got a lot of experience in terms of Chinese and culture, and he says that's something we really need to highlight in some of the things that we're doing when we make global comparisons. Global trends in prison upsizing and downsizing. I wrote a paper on this that came out a couple of years ago. We did a special issue of the journal that I'm the editor of called Victims and Offenders. There's a plug for my journal. And the short answer is our prison systems around the world getting bigger or smaller. We're hearing all about mass incarceration, the need to reduce our prison size. Globally, they're getting bigger. Okay, so that's the big systems are getting bigger. So when you look at prison population, globally you're looking at about 11 million people when you add in the pretrial detention population in South Korea and China that you have to kind of estimate because they don't give you the data. Half of the world's prison population is in 3 countries, US, China, and the Russian Federation. Actually, the Russian Federation, as of today, has dropped down to 4th. Brazil has now jumped up into the 3rd spot, so we are seeing some changes because of major changes in Russia that I'll talk about in a minute in terms of the Russian Federation. So you got 20% of the world's population and about half the world's prisoners. So something's going on, something about those areas that they've decided to come down heavy on incarceration. In terms of upsizing, increasing the size, you're seeing the prison populations in terms of numbers. Forget rates for a minute, because then we'll be talking about the Caribbean and small countries. Let's look at prison populations. So it's growing at a rate higher than the world population. In terms of downsizing, 3 of the top 20 countries in terms of size have downsized: Russian Federation, South Africa, and Pakistan. And the biggest reduction that you see is in the Russian Federation, and that was economically driven, as I'll show in a minute. But that's a 37% reduction in total prison population between 2000 and 2015. That's a major change. So something happened in Russia. Now, you might not agree with how they've done it, but we'll look at that. And just so you get a feel for this looks better on the maps that I have on my website, but if you to get a feel for this, you got 8 countries from Asia, 5 from the Americas, 4 from Europe, and 3 from Africa. That's your top 20 in terms of your largest prison populations. That's 75% of the world's prison population are in those 20 countries. Doing a global review isn't actually that hard, because 90% of the world's prison population is in 50 countries. So you're really trying to identify and map and look at 50 top countries there. So 17 of the top 20 increased their prison populations between 2000 and 2015. So despite all the discussion we have here in this country about how do we reduce our prison population, the trend globally is going up. So I'm not seeing it going the other direction. Does increased incarceration reduce crime? It's a question that, of course, people have asked. And if you read the experts, you know that we talk about the great crime drop and how much of that is explained because we use mass incarceration. And a certain percentage of that crime drop can be tied to mass incarceration. There's no doubt about it. Probably about a quarter of it. That means 75% are due to other factors. And so it's not just mass incarceration. There's other things that are happening. And if you're interested in that, something that I write about, we won't get in today. But if that's true, and there's no evidence really to support, which I think is true, that the upsizing our prison population, why do the prison populations continue to rise? And this is something that people have looked at for violent crime in particular, but in looking at patterns and causes. But I think you can say the following, and this is a quote from me, I guess it is. Basically, it's simpler, we're in trouble, plug in, I knew we needed a power cord, to marginalize individuals. This is how they're going to get me to stop talking, I see how it is. It's simpler to marginalize at-risk, poverty pocket communities and respond punitively to their criminal behavior when it occurs than to address the underlying root causes of the problem. And what are they? Well, if you read reviews and you look at this, it's poverty, inequality, lack of resources, opportunity, no procedural justice. These are the primary drivers of crime rates in our community. So if we can't deal with the underlying problems, we're going to constantly have to deal with, we should just, blame the offender, right? Not the underlying problem. And so we'll respond to them because that's who you have in front of you, and it's much more difficult to deal with root causes. And so that's, I think, a real short answer to that. Now, downsizing and crime rates. People always ask me, give me a takeaway. What's your takeaway? What is it on that? Well, if you look at the Russian Federation, almost 400,000 fewer prisoners, a 39% reduction. That's an amazing story, right? That's a story that you should be reading in the journals, and you're not reading it. You get some people saying, are you really going to believe the Russians? So there really is a fake news among academics. I swear, it's ridiculous. They don't look at this. Fake news, it can't be true. Well, I think it is true, and I've been researching this. I need a whole paper just on this one. My takeaway is that you can reduce a country's reliance on incarceration while still protecting the public. In fact, these policies that we're going to be talking about the rest of this presentation may actually increase community protection. There's a surprise, right? That incarceration does not maximize community protection, the kind of things that we're going to talk about and what Project 180 is doing. That's what maximizes community protection, if that's your overriding concern. So how did the Russians do what the Russians did? Well, they closed prisons. And they expanded the use of non-incarceration sanctions, including what they called corrective labor. Now you're getting nervous, I know, you're thinking the gulag and all that, but it looks more like a German day fine system for a majority of offenders. And what I mean by that is in Germany they use day fines that link to your ability to pay. So some people in this room, obviously that's why you're here, make a lot of money. Some don't, right? So if we're going to punish people for committing the same crime by taking a percentage of the money that they have, that's what a day fine is in a nutshell. So that model tied to corrective labor was this. If you get convicted of a crime and you have a job, so you have a primary job, you stay in the job, but you pay a percentage of that salary back to the state. Okay, so that's one part of it. A lot of offenders don't have that principal job. What happens with them? And this is the part that gets a little shaky when I start talking about the Russian Federation, but this is what they're doing right now. You serve your punishment at jobs determined by local government bodies, which are monitored by the Correctional Inspectorate. That's difficult. It's a very big country for the Correctional Inspector to get out there, and there's some issues that are a lot of issues that are relating to the kind of jobs that people are getting. Private for-profit companies making money off offenders, how much are they paying them? This is the stuff that I need to find out more about, but what I'm seeing is a major change in sentencing that relates to non-incarcerative sanctions. I'm not saying we should go to corrective labor, but I'm saying that there are different ways of thinking about it if you're trying to reduce the size of your prison population. Why did they want to do that in the Russian Federation? Money, which has driven a lot of the discussion back over the last several years. We can talk about philosophy here in this room, right? We're among friends, but most people talk about economics. So when they talk about the U.S. prison industry, we talk about an $80 billion industry. So if you're talking about downsizing that, you're talking about saving money. In Russia, they were trying to save money, and so I didn't see it as a philosophical shift, but certainly you can present it as a philosophical shift, but I don't see it as that. But the bottom line is non-incarcerated sanctions are being used more, and prisons used less. So there's still some of the most brutal prison systems in the world. People are dying just literally getting to the prison. Transportation to prisons is a difficult issue that they have as well, because they're often located way out and about. But that's my Russian story for you. So here's the part that I probably should have started here because it's almost over, right? But can good prisons and community correction systems be identified? This is one of the things that kind of drives me crazy as an academic. I should be able to talk to a group of people and identify what the top 10 prison systems are, what the top 10 community correction systems are. I can't do it. If one of you had cystic fibrosis, my oldest son has it, I can go to a website and tell you what the top 10 programs are to treat cystic fibrosis and what the survival rates are. I can't do that in this area, which is crazy. So because of that cystic fibrosis website example I just gave you, it's why I started looking at performance measures. I said, well, if they can do it there, why can't we do this? And the answer is people get very nervous about sharing information about how well they're doing, and you can't blame them when they're running correctional systems. The average warden in the United States lasts for about 3.5 years, right? So a commissioner of corrections, 3.5, warden about 4.5. So when your life cycle as a manager is fairly short term, you might not be thinking in terms of the same way as somebody who's going to be there like I have in academia for 40 years. You're going to have a different approach to the whole thing. So I think we need to develop performance measures. We don't have them, so what I'm going to talk to you about is anecdotal. So you and I might read a really interesting New York Times article, Washington Post piece, to mention all those great fake news places. But we read in there and we say, well, look, why can't we do something like this? And so I'll mention a few of those. We'll highlight one in particular. And there are some things that we can do. Iceland's been written a lot about lately because they have an open system model where they literally don't put locks on the doors. And I've said to people here, well, that's because it's Iceland. Where are they going to go? But I'm making a joke, but it's a different model of responsibility in terms of and accountability for individuals that are there that are doing their time, right? So it's a different model. And residential programs that have open door policies, the same thing. If you leave, then there's going to be consequences, but you can leave, right? I mean, walkaways, when we have people escaping from prison in the United States, they only escape from pre-release centers, right? And most of them are back in the system within 2 days. And that's the reality of it. So I just thought I'd mention that part of it. So Iceland's there. Norway is another one. There's a term that we use that people use in other parts of the world. I find out when I go. American exceptionalism. We think we're the best at everything, right? And they mock us about how we're not, right? So when I went to Australia, the first question I was asked is, how can an American corrections expert have anything to offer Australia? That was literally the question I was asked when I went there. And people were all upset, and they apologized afterwards for the person asking that question. I said, if I can't answer that question, you shouldn't hire me. You should be able to respond to that. And the way I respond to it is that, yeah, we have certainly a lot of failed policies, but we also evaluate those programs. In a lot of other parts of the world, we don't even evaluate them. We just change them. We don't talk about evidence-based practice. We don't do that. So I think there is a way to respond to that as well. So, but Norway has been used as an example of Norwegian exceptionalism because they think they've got the model. And I'm going to present the model to you, and let's see what you think. It's a much smaller scale prison system, but let's see if you think it could apply to something that you do here at a local level. And we'll look at that. And so recently, if I was discussing this, I'd also talk about France. Major problem in prisons in France. Literally Google prisons in France and you'll see what I mean. There's major problems right now in terms of immigrants being locked up in the prison population and prison violence. But that France is typically viewed in the literature as an example of a humane prison system. They have a public-private partnership model that is pretty interesting to look at. So, but I'm pulling back on France right now and just focusing on Norway, I think for a reason, because I think this will make people in the room at least think a little about how we might redesign some of our prison and jail systems here. And some of you are going to say, we already do this. Well, we probably do. There's programs like Project 180 in a lot of parts of the country, but they're often very small in scale. And the question is, how do you make that the first stop and the smaller scale, the incarceration, right? So a lot of what we talk about, if you could change the scale of community versus institutional sanctions, you could do a lot of this in this area. So, all right. So let's look at that. Okay, that's an example of a prison in Norway, and a guy sitting, he's got a nice little TV there. It's kind of a small room. Couple of things that you'll notice in terms of prison design. Norway doesn't want big, tall buildings. They want everything spread out. They also, there's a wall, got to be a wall, right? Any presentation today has to mention the wall. There's a wall, and it's very clear, but it's got to be within an area with a lot of open space around it. They literally have a blueberry forest in one of the prisons I was reading about that's tied in and within the prison grounds. So they have a different view of that. So that's the carceral geography part of it, where you can talk about designs and how it might have an impact on behavior as well. So here's the model in a nutshell. I should have made it a shorter nutshell. I apologize for that. In terms of purpose, what they decided, and they decided this about 1998 in Norway, is that what they wanted to do was put a focus on rehabilitating prisoners, there's something novel, through education, job training, and therapy. And so they designed their program with that as their primary purpose. In terms of design, in terms of the physical design, there was the dual purpose of detention, so yes, there's a wall, and rehabilitation. So there's a lot of open space, no buildings over 2 stories in height. Management style. What they talked about there is what I did see in Australia, and I definitely saw in Ireland as well, dynamic security, which emphasizes one-to-one relationships between staff and offenders. That's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. That's an classic informal social control mechanism, right? When we talk about probation officers, if we have any here, if you have friends that are POs, I think the best POs are the ones that develop relationships, and if you informal, because informal social controls work a lot better than formal social controls in terms of changing behavior and controlling behavior. So that's again, that's a model that they're using there. I like that philosophy. You have to have certain types of staff with certain background and training to do it, which means you're going to have to change your core group of line personnel to pull it off, but you could do it. Expanded jurisdiction. This is an important one, and this is what you're highlighting here is a reentry program. Well, whose responsibility it is for offender change once they leave the prison and go back to the community? Should the prison only be held accountable for what happens within the walls, or should they be held accountable for what happens upon release? Their view was, no, we need an expanded jurisdiction, which means they are going to be in the business of running reentry programs and coordinating with the community, which is a different model than if you have another agency doing that and it's their responsibility, and hey, at least there was, we kept a lid on it while they were here, and we ran our programs while they were here. Did they get follow-up in the community? That's not my job. If you want them to do that, you're going to have to expand their jurisdiction. So you're talking about changing the organizational structure of your correctional system to make it, to have them have responsibility. If you're going to hold me accountable, you've got to let me pick the groceries, right? I hate to quote Bill Parcells, but I'm from Boston. I guess we could do Belichick and say, do your job too, but if it's his job to have an impact in the community, then it would make sense, or his or her job, then it would make sense that they would have a control over that part of it. So the expanded jurisdiction is, I think, unique. They've only done that for about 10 years. And then what they did that I think was most interesting is expand their resource network. And they were able to do it in Norway because they had the resources to do it in Norway, because they restructured the way they were doing their budget. Government agencies were involved. You had to secure a home, a job, access to supported social networks for each inmate before release, and the social network would be tied in to provide health care, education, and pensions for all citizens. Wouldn't that be something, right? With all the, disjointed, discoordinated, you can't get me into treatment because there's no funding here, there, we're waiting 3 months. I failed during the 3 months because I couldn't get in. I mean, that's what I, hear most from people lamenting problems in the U.S. in terms of a disjointed social network, in terms of service delivery. Cost. In 2015 in Norway, if the numbers that I have are correct, it's about $93,000 per offender in U.S. dollars, compared to a U.S. average of a little over $31,000. Somebody mentioned $21,000 local jail cost here. So that's a lot more per offender. But don't multiply it by the number of people in prisons today. Do more with fewer people, right? So utilize non-incarceration sanctions for a great bulk of the individuals that you currently are putting in prison. And for those who are in prison, focus on something called offender change or individual change. And not that you can change them or a program can. What you're going to talk about is supporting desistance. Ultimately, individuals have to decide they're going to change on their own. And you can provide supporting services for that. But that's going to be an individual decision on what somebody is going to do or not do. So that's kind of a different kind of view of it. Don't think there's any magic elixir, silver bullet program that you're going to put me in cognitive behavioral treatment and somehow I'm going to be better after a 16-week program. That's not true. But you can do things and put support services in place to help people go through this process of changing. I think that is possible. So that's a different way of thinking about it. What do they cite? They cite 3-year reincarceration rates of about 20%. That's typically not comparable to the U.S. because with the U.S. we typically don't talk about reincarceration rates. And what you have to mix in is reincarceration rates that are affected by things like technical violators. You probably know half of all new prison admissions each year in the United States of people who are technical violators are probation and parole. So I started this out by talking about prison crowding and mass imprisonment. You probably know mass probation is probably the bigger story. It's your backdoor way into prisons. And that means offenders are coming in and out of prisons very quickly because the group most likely to fail are the people that you're putting in on their technical violators when they come out because the same support services that weren't there the first time aren't there the second time. So you have a lot of people doing 6 to 9 months short time and coming out and recycling through the system again and again. So it's actually different than the approach you deal with longer-term offenders. The average prison term for a state prison is 2.5 years in the United States, right? And we have a whole bulk doing 10 years plus. So Norway did another thing. They limited the length of sentences beyond a certain number of years. They did do that as well. So that's the Norway model. And again, I wish I could say that's the #1 ranked program in the world. I really can't. This is anecdotal because we don't have those comparative measures to other countries, except what exists in a few reports. Oh, that's another picture. That's a little better picture of what a cell looks like in a Norway prison, right? Not bad. Better than my son's dorm at Syracuse, I'll tell you that. He complains about it all the time. He wants to transfer. So here's this is my takeaway, the defining characteristics of a good prison and community corrections system. As I started going down the list, I realized I can say this for both systems. One is educated, well-trained, and treatment-oriented staff and management. Now, I'm a criminal justice professor. I've been doing this since 1984 at the University of Massachusetts. We train people and we give them degrees in something called criminal justice. Do we have any criminal justice majors here? Nobody wants to raise their hand. Tell me. A couple? You essentially got a degree in what I would call, it's like a public administration degree. You learned a lot about a bunch of different things, but you weren't taught specific skills like you might learn in a psychology major or a social work major, very different orientation. So in this country, we've hired a lot of CJ majors in corrections, and if we want to take a lead from other countries, Australia, for example, psych majors, social work majors. So I'm killing my own profession in this presentation, I know. But it's a different orientation. If you want people to have that orientation, you're probably going to have to hire a different group of people. Now, the funny thing about that for me is that think about the 70s, 60s, well, you can't, but I'll think about them for you. The people that were in corrections had social work and psych and sociology degrees because CJ didn't exist, right? So the mid-level managers that went through the 70s and 80s had a bunch of these people that were more like tail 'em, nail 'em, and jail 'em types. I'm sorry for the two people that raised their hands. But they had a different orientation, more of an administrative orientation, transactional orientation. And their mid-level managers were treatment stuff. So you had that kind of disjunction between line and mid-level staff. Now we've moved to another direction. We want to come back to treatment. We want to have more treatment-oriented line staff. Well, now your mid-level managers, who are they? Sorry, you're the CJ majors. So now you're going to a different type of little, cognitive dissonance type thing going on that we're going to have to work our way through. It's going to take time. That's why it's not easy to pull this off. But so it's easy to write up there educated, well-trained, and treatment-oriented staff. And then for any of the managers here, they're going to be like, oh yeah, thanks. Like I didn't know that, right? And then low staff inmate ratios is one characteristic that I see of an effective prison system. I think that's something that does jump out to me. Well-designed assessment and treatment programs, and I'd like to see them independently, externally evaluated because the internal evaluations are often just, lip service because you're afraid to criticize your boss who developed the program. So all the internal evaluations I have problems with. I want to see external evaluations, and I like the model that UK has where they have an accreditation panel that actually objectively reviews what's going on. So then you've dealt with that. Of course, listen, we all want to sell what we think is innovative and a great idea, so you can try those models out, but you better evaluate them. So build the evaluation in, I would say. Not just because I'm an evaluator, but maybe because it could be true. And again, this comes from my own experience evaluating programs, is you need to develop a culture that supports individual change. If you've hired a group of line staff that basically don't think offenders can change, then exactly what are they going to do to change people or to support desistance if they don't think people will ever change? So if that's your line staff, you've got a problem. You could try to retrain them, but is that really going to work? It's probably going to talk about a long-term change. Now, some managers deal with that by saying, this is why I want to hire the private sector. We'll just throw out the unions and all those workers, and we'll just start anew. Well, you really, that's a debate they're having in different parts of the world. 2 minutes? Great, okay. So we need that, and well-designed reentry planning with linkages between institutional and community treatment. I like the model Norway has. That's a model that requires you to expand the jurisdiction of whoever the prison manager is into that reentry system and develop those relationships as part of their job and part of their own performance review. Real quick, I have 2 minutes now. Here's just some numbers from other countries. I wish I could rank them and tell you Australia was the best. They're not. But the numbers that they put out say 39% recidivism. They have a 3-year follow-up period that has to do with rearrest. Japan has a low recidivism rate, and they show reconviction. UK, 46%. Scotland 50, USA 52, Ireland 62. They all have different operational definitions, not to bore you too much with that. Some are 1-year follow-up, some are 2, some are 3. Some say rearrest, some say reincarceration, some say reincarceration for a felony. So I can't rank them yet for you, but that's where we need to be at. And so we do these little model presentations and try to convince you that Norway is great and exceptional and all that, but I really can't say that that is the only way to go because we haven't done the performance ranking that we can do in other areas like cystic fibrosis and other areas as well. So again, this is a paper I have coming out in a special issue of a journal called Criminology and Public Policy in May, and I got 1 minute to highlight this, and I think I can. The prison industry has decided to go into the community corrections business. I'm not going to get into the numbers on that, but they're going in big time. And I use the term in the article I wrote as technology as Trojan horse. The way they're doing it right now in the US and in other countries is they're buying up the small to mid-sized electronic monitoring companies in order to position themselves to run day reporting centers, community treatment centers, community correction centers, and provide that. So the Trojan horse for me is EM. They can do it better than someone else. They'll get you up to speed. They'll give you the latest and greatest. You'll see it all. You buy that, and then you start buying the other stuff that goes along with it. So that's what's happening in terms of privatization. 3 reasons to do it that I'll mention to you need to think about, because if we're going to look globally and then think about it locally, what they say in the UK and they say in some other places as well is, look, if we do competition between public and private, performance will improve, because if the publics don't perform, they're gone. Right? So that's the view. And UK is the first system that I've ever seen that has tried to privatize their probation system. They privatized a significant amount of their prison system years ago. So that's one thing to think about. Would it increase performance? The second is filling service gaps. And you get in other countries, in particular some of the smaller and less developed countries, there's no one else to provide that service, so the private sector is providing something that there's no network in place. So they come in because they're the only game in town. They're the only ones up to speed to do it. It sounds like post-war reconstruction that I'm talking about, how the big companies go back into the Iraqs and the world. Well, that's true. There's only a few that can get up to speed for that. It seems to be true as well in some of these countries now, and certainly in South America I saw that. And the third possibility is that you actually believe in the value of partnerships between public and private agencies, whether it's private for profit or private nonprofit like you have here. And you think that's the best way to do business. And so France was an example that I use in that. Colombia in the community correction system, I see it there as well. So these are the models you need to think about if you're going to go privatization. What's the purpose of it, and what are you trying to gain? And again, we don't need Geo Group. We'll skip with that, and we'll skip that. So here's my recommendations. New sentencing and revocation policies. An easy one would be put a moratorium on no technical violators going back to prison. Washington State did it in 1999. The world did not cave in. Okay, so you can do it. Don't put any technical violators back in prison. If somebody's committed a new crime, rather than process them on the technical, convict them of the new crime. All right? If they didn't, manage them in the community. You could have significant reductions in your U.S. prison population if you did it. I think you could drop it by 40%. By the way, if you did that, you're still 2.5 times the global average in terms of your incarceration rate. So it's an impact, but you're still bad. Second, treatment-focused prisons and community corrections. The kind of stuff, the work that's going on here in reentry needs to happen in probation, and it needs to happen in prisons. The Norwegian type of model that you saw, the Norwegian exceptionalism, we need to apply that model. You're going to have to reduce the scale of the systems to do it, but that's what you need. And the third, and maybe probably the most important, is you need line staff that actually are treatment-focused. And you also need management on the same page. So, and again, I think that's tough right now because a lot of the people that are in those management positions were trained by people like me, and that's terrible. We can't have that. So we need to go back to that model where we think about people that have that orientation. So I'll stop with that. Thank you. Q&A. Okay, good. You can ask me a question and I can finish my presentation by answering. I like
That's
that.
the right question. So I find myself very interested in white-collar crime lately. And I've read quite a bit about how the enforcement of white-collar crime has dropped precipitously over the last few decades, and obviously there is tremendous sentencing disparity. Do you find those factors also in other countries, or is the United States unique in that?
Well, we've always responded to white-collar crime through federal regulatory agency, regulatory control. But we have increased sanctions for white-collar crime over the last 80 years. Only reason I have this stuff in my head is I taught white-collar crime last semester, so thank you for asking that. So we are actually sentencing white-collar offenders. Now, obviously, Manatee yesterday, you saw, or this morning, you see that, way under the guidelines. It's amazing how we can go away from guidelines for one person and not for another, right? But that's out there. But we certainly have federal sentencing guidelines you can take a look at, and so we do have that. We are criminalizing more and more of the white-collar crime. Obviously the Fannie Mae crisis, the 2008 economic downturn got people to pay a little more attention to it. So I am not seeing that it's been 2 decades of less enforcement. I'm seeing more charges, more people in the system. But we've always relied on the federal regulatory agencies to handle that type of crime. That's how we've done it, which means you're going to have some type of enforced self-regulation, right? So if your car isn't working, or your Pinto isn't working, go to the old people in the room, we'll allow them to do a recall, right? How many of you had a recall in the last year for something, right? Well, that's essentially self-regulation, right? They're doing it before they're forced to do it, so that's going to cost even more money, and most of us won't go and do it anyway, so it doesn't actually cost them all that much. But that's a good question. I think I have seen a change in that area in terms of white-collar offenders. Some people say, well, gee, if you just put more white-collar offenders in prison, and I usually say stop with that, because you can't be in favor of non-incarceration sanctions for one group and then not for another, right? But we've always been creative in how we sentence white-collar offenders. If we use that same creativity for street criminals, we'd be in a better place right now. So that would be my response to that. So.
Hi, I actually was invited by our dear friends here, and I didn't know that I was coming to a presentation like that. And I do appreciate all that you shared. This is very eye-opening to me. I'm a new resident of Florida, and one of the things that I am concerned about is at least the police impact on the arrest and then ultimately the criminal system and then ultimately jails and prison. I like the reform part of re-entry and everything. I think that's the way to go. I really appreciate that. But I wonder, in your model and your studies and in your delivery and your classes, do you talk about the front end, of our system? I'm a black mother of 4. Mm-hmm. 4 adult overachieving students, but they all look that. And right. I'm concerned about the racial and cultural impact.
Well, I mean, that's the new term of the year is procedural justice, right? We're looking at police-community relations, and they've put certain technology in place to try to make you feel better about how the police are doing, right? There's more video as well. Now we're having do they have the cameras here in Florida like we have in most major cities? So body-worn cameras are a way of kind of looking at getting a view of police accountability, right? But that doesn't mean it's going to change police behavior. But the assumption is, like me today, I have to be on my best behavior. Someone's filming me, right? And so, but you would hope that it would be a culture change in terms of how you deal with certain groups of people and the prejudices that you might have brought into it, and you deal with that over time. But it might be that the camera makes a difference too. I think I have a book coming out this next year on the technology revolution in criminal justice, and I think that's something we have to look at, is how the role that technology is playing. And certainly the public plays a role in that, because you all have your phones, right? So it's surveillance that we call it, where the public watches the police. Of course, now the police are watching themselves and the public as well. So I think there's a change in terms of police-community relations that I've seen in major cities, where there's much more of an emphasis on how you as the police officer presents yourself to the public. So I am seeing that, and you would think the community-oriented policing models would emphasize that. But again, that's a training issue as well, but it's also the orientation of the people there as well. I mean, with the body-worn cameras example, assaults against police actually, in the one big experiment was done, actually went up. And the reason they think that might have happened is because that the individual that they were talking to didn't see that aggressive approach that sometimes is trained to dealing with crisis situations, and so they were more likely to react. That's one response that I've heard. It also could be that they have the videotape, so they charge you. That's how the more jaundiced here might view it. But it might be that because they're less aggressive, then that aggression actually was reducing incidents against the police. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's something that's out there in the literature. It's one of the reasons that police unions have pushed back against the body-worn camera. But I think they're there to stay. I think accountability is there to stay, and I think police commissioners and typically are going to be held for the performance of their line staff, so they're paying attention to it in ways that didn't happen in the past. So I do see that as a change, a positive change as well.
They would incorporate again. Officer friendly back in the 60s and the 70s
Yep.
was a very good thing. With the PAL program for at least the young teens,
Right.
white, black, any color,
Right.
was a very good thing in some of the major cities in America. I don't know about internationally. But if you have an opportunity and you're voicing to people to use that model, I thought it worked very well. I mean, I loved our police officers.
Right.
And I still love them today as well. But I think the conflicting issues that are happening today is sending mixed messages, wrong messages, alternative wrong truths out into the community.
Right. Good point. Thanks.
We're out of time for our Q&A. I'm so sorry, but Professor Byrne will be around for a few minutes afterwards. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Professor Byrne. Oh, don't go off yet. Jim, you're not off the hook yet. So I want to thank Professor Byrne for sharing his expertise. Thank you for shining a spotlight on international initiatives. I'm sure many of us will leave today thinking about how some of those initiatives might take shape here in our own backyard. And as a small token for our gratitude to you for leaving the snowy landscape, which is Massachusetts, to venture south to palm trees, sunshine, and temperatures slightly above freezing, we'd like to present you with this. Never seen this before.
There's no check?
So, yeah, I know. It's better than a check.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Seriously, your presence here has added much depth to our ongoing conversations about incarceration and reentry, and we can't thank you enough for being here with us today. So, thank you, Professor Byrne. And now I'd like to turn our focus to our own backyard, and specifically Project 180's residential program, Nick's House. Here with us today is House Leader Matt, who will share with us his journey with Project 180 and Nick's House, and how it has impacted his life. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Matt, come on up.
Well, let's start and say I'm not nervous at all. Not even a little bit. I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I've grown up in Sarasota County my entire life. I lived in Venice majority of that time, and I grew up in the most average household you could possibly imagine. It's been about 9 months, almost 9 months since I went to Nick's house, and from the person I was before I went there to the person that I am now is a complete 180. Before I went, I was doing nothing positive and nothing good, and I have a family that relies on me, and everything in my life didn't matter. I was addicted to drugs, and I had one goal and one goal only, and that was to get another drug and put it in my body no matter the cost. Fortunately, I got in some trouble. I was lucky enough to get into a little bit of trouble, and I got to go and get introduced to the drug court program, and I did not go with any willingness by any means, and I was not the star of the drug court program for the beginning. I luckily got to mess up enough to where they took control, and they gave me a few options, and I wasn't very happy about them, but I allowed them to make a decision for me, and that was to get me out of my area I was living in and get me away from the people that I was around. And they brought up Project 180. After agreeing to go there, I've managed to do so many different things that I'm not used to, and one of those things is I get to drive. And couldn't imagine getting a driver's license back with the things that I've done behind a wheel and the people that I've hurt, and and the amount of money that I wouldn't have been able to pay without the help of Project 180. I am currently the leader of the house, and still kind of wonder why someone would trust me. It's odd, Someone has the ability to put enough trust in me to not only look over, essentially your baby. You love this house, and I do too, but I have had a lot of people backing me, including drug court, Barbara, Mike, who's the manager, and I'm extremely grateful for those people. I would not be where I'm at today without that. Project 180 doesn't just help you give you a geographical change from your negative environment that you're in. They help you with every little everyday things when it comes to food. I go to the grocery store and I'm like baffled on what I'm allowed to get. I'm like, I'm not eating ramen noodle soups, for the next week. And the environment itself is we all care about each other. That's the essential goal, is to be able to care about one another without having to, get back into our old ways of how am I going to get what I can out of this person. Like, we all benefit each other. And Barbara is by far one of the most amazing people I've ever met. Without her, I would not be able to be where I'm at. So since I've been there, I've been able to maintain my license, maintain employment, and I get to be the leader of the house and make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to do, which is fairly easy because we have an amazing group of guys right now. We have a bit of a different selection process compared to some other places, but in turn, we have these people that are willing to make their life better, and that's what we need. And this program, I've been to jail, I've been to prison, I've been to programs, and it's never done anything for me. It's given me a release date that I get to go get high again, or I get to go commit another crime, and that's what it's done. And since I've been here, it's been the fastest 9 months I've ever been placed into a place, and not willing, I'm not really willing to leave. So, you know, before I have release dates. You know, I have these dates that I get to sit there and I'm like, yes, I get to go screw my life up again on this day. And today, like, I'm not ready to leave because I'm not set up fully for me to successfully, you know, strive in society. And hopefully after all is done, I get to continue with Project 180 and I will get to move forward with the houses that they keep growing and building, and I have that opportunity because this keeps me clean today. Without this place, I would not be clean. Without the people in it, I would not be clean. And without the motivation for not just myself, but from them pushing me, I wouldn't be able to do this. You know, it's been a long road. I've been an IV drug user since I was 12 years old. You know, that's all I know. That, and I know how to live behind bars, and I can do it really well. And this is the place that taught me how to not do that anymore. And I'm a parent to my kids. I'm a father to 3 kids that adore me. You know, and I'm extremely grateful for that. And I'm really grateful for everybody that's here that helps with this program, and all the people that decided to come tonight. I really appreciate it. And I'm extremely grateful for Barb and Mike and everybody, the state attorney who we had dinner with the other night. Like, we get to do cool things like that. Like, I don't have to see you in a courtroom. I get to go eat dinner with you, and we had a good dinner. It wasn't on a plastic tray. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. And today I get to confidently say that I'm clean, and I'm happy.
That's one way to get a standing ovation. Stand up after somebody like Matt speaks. Thank you, Matt, for that. Thank you for bringing a life to the name of this organization, Project 180, and for sharing how Project 180 has helped you turn your life around. That was a really great story you shared with us, so thank you for that. My name is Wendy Cox, and I volunteer with Project 180. My husband and I are sponsors here at the lunch. We are financial supporters and members of the Founders Circle. Happy to support the work that we've just heard about. Now that the listening and learning part is over, it's time for the action part of our lunch here today. And I don't know about you, but after hearing about the incarceration challenges and hearing a story from Matt, I am ready to do something. I want to be a more informed citizen. I want to be part of a better solution, and I want to give people a chance to start over. So you can all participate in that. And we're going to play a little game, all right? You look like a lively audience, so we're going to play a game. Tell me if you know what game we're playing.
Get your checkbooks out.
Okay, what are we playing? This is the audience participation part. Charades. I don't know who made up this movie thing. The young people are confused about why this would be a movie. Some of you old people are like, yeah, it was a film. Okay, we're going to play charades. I'm going to be the actor, and then you all have to guess what I'm doing. I'm starting my acting now.
Writing a check.
Filling out the information card.
Yes. Filling out the response card. You may not have noticed, it's tucked inside this orange envelope. I was filling out a response card. That's what it looks like to fill out a response card. Okay, I have another one. Come on. Writing a check. Writing a check. This is what it looks like to write a check. If you have a checkbook with you, get it out, see if you can do it. Just mimic what I'm doing here. Okay, I have another one. Pulling out the credit card. Now I'm using an American Express because it has high limits. You can also use a Visa, a MasterCard, any card you've got in your pocket. Go ahead, pull it out. And I think we can swipe it here, or do we just write it on the card? Write it on the card. Okay, so that was our game of charades. You did an excellent job, and now you are going to be the actors, and you are going to pull out the response cards, and the checkbooks, and the credit cards, and I'm going to tell you what you're going to do with them next. On the response card, there is a front and a back. On the front, you write your name, and then you can write in your donation amount. And if you are a person with very little time, but you want to support what we're doing, you simply have to donate, and then you're done. So you can just fill out the front of the card, and I'm looking around, and some of you are not moving your arms. So you should be moving your arms around, grabbing these cards, filling them out with a pen. There's pens at everybody's places. So you can just make a donation to support this great work. Don't hold back. For those of you that have more time on your hands and want to do something more than just write a check or make a donation, flip the card over, and it will tell you how you can get involved. So this is a small organization, but a very powerful organization that does some important work. And you might want to be involved by being a volunteer or helping out in some way. There's lots of ways you can do that. And you may be just the person that Barbara needs right now. So if you have any time or any interest, even just a tiny little bit amount of interest in helping out or learning more, check one of these boxes on the back of the card, and Barbara will give you a call. But remember Pamela's story. She came to a lunch, had just a very, very short conversation with Barbara, and found herself at the podium today. So you don't know what's going to happen, but it'll be good. And of course, we have 2 more lunches. So one's on April 5th and one's on May 10th. So bring a new friend. Come to the lunch, introduce them to this great work that Project 180 is doing. And now you're all busy writing on your cards, I can see. So while you're doing that, whether you are making a donation and you're just going to be done and walk out, or if you're going to check a box, stick around, talk to Barbara, find yourself at the podium up here next year, you can do that. And Barbara now is going to come up and give a few closing remarks. And so Barbara, come on up. And oh, there's one more thing I'm going to do. Now, this is my last charade. What am I doing? I'm not giving these to Barbara. I'm taking this home. Remember she said, make a donation and take flowers home? Now I just handed her a 20, but you don't have to hand her a 20 or leave a 20 on your table. If you carry hundreds around, we take hundreds. Or any currency you have in your wallet, we're interested in that. So don't forget, make a donation, take a flower arrangement home, and think about the great day you had here.
Isn't she great? While you are doing something at your tables, please pull out your phones and go into your inbox, and you should have received, if all went well, you should have received a survey straight into your inbox. There are a few people we didn't have email addresses for, especially for table 2, but we have a few paper surveys on every table. So if you could fill those out for us, we would really appreciate it. It helps our funders know that we're working hard, and helps them know how successful this luncheon was, and us as well. It gives us some good reflection. So more than likely, if you have a phone, we have your email address, and we sent you a survey. So we would sure appreciate your filling it out. While everyone is working on their checks and their surveys, for the attorneys in the room, I'd like to give you your CLE credit number. If everyone's ready. Now I see people pulling out the pens. Okay. All right. So this is for 1 CLE credit, 1 international law credit, 1 international litigation and arbitration credit, and or half of a state and federal government and administrative practice credit. And the number is 1900926, N as in Nancy. Again, that's 1900-926, N as in Nancy. And if you missed that, there is a sheet on the registration table so that you can catch that number then. All righty. So I want to, yes, did somebody have a question? No. Okay. So I wanted to say thank you so much to Wendy and to Matt and to Pamela and to Professor Byrne. You were all fantastic today. We really appreciated everything you said. And apropos of Professor Byrne's comments about individuals who are caught up in the system, who are marginalized, I'd like to just bring your attention to Project 180's vision, which is to reduce poverty, homelessness, unemployment, and criminal behavior among formerly incarcerated citizens. So I hope that you will take that home with you and understand what we are really trying to do here. On April the 5th, we are looking at the local treatment courts. The sheriff will also be here with several of the treatment court judges. And Ed Brodsky will have a panel that is moderated by John Thaxton, so we hope that you will join us for that. And then on May 10th, we have the honor of bringing the California the Secretary of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation here to talk about some of the remarkable programs that they are doing in California, specifically at San Quentin and a few of the other prisons. So if you're unfamiliar with the terminology, the Secretary is the top guy in the state. And so he will be here on May 10th. So again, I'll just remind you about our centerpieces and just want to let you know how much we are grateful for your presence here today and your interest in this cause. Thank you and have a lovely afternoon.